The sound of mist dripping from the leaves, a sound that used to be a source of comfort, now sends shivers down my spine. It's a constant reminder of the day I saw something in the whole rainforest, something that defied all logic and reason, something that has made me question everything I thought I knew about the world. I was a ranger, I was a protector, but I was also a fool, a man who had wandered into something that was better left unseen. My name is Caleb Hudson, but most people call me Cal. I'm a park ranger in the Pacific Northwest, and I've spent most of my life in the wilderness, surrounded by the beauty and the solitude of the forests. I've hiked countless trails, charted hidden rivers, and slept under a canopy of stars. But there was always something about the whole rainforest that had a unique pull on me. Its ancient trees, its lush vegetation, its perpetual mist, it all seemed to be part of another world, and I always felt like it had secrets that were waiting to be uncovered. And that was my biggest mistake. I've always been drawn to the untamed parts of nature, to the places that are untouched by civilization, and for years, I was content in the solitude of the wilderness, finding a sense of peace in the quiet corners of the world, feeling like I was part of it all. My job as a ranger was not just a way to earn a living. It was a calling, a way to connect with the natural world, a way to be part of its secrets. But that day, my understanding of the world was shattered by a single encounter with something that did not belong. It was late autumn. The air was cold and damp. The leaves were falling from the trees, and the forest floor was covered with a thick layer of moss. I was tracking a wounded elk, following its trail through the dense undergrowth, hoping to find it before it succumbed to its injuries. I was alone, yes, but I was used to it, comfortable in my solitude, confident in my knowledge of the wilderness. The forest was always my home, and I always felt safe in its embrace. Until that day, the mist was thick that morning, a veil that seemed to shroud the forest in an ethereal glow, and the trees seemed taller, more imposing, their shadows dancing like living things. The air was heavy, almost suffocating, filled with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, and the silence was broken only by the soft sound of the mist dripping from the trees. It was a beautiful scene, yes, but there was also something ominous about it, a sense that I was being watched, a feeling that I was not alone. I followed the elk's trail deeper into the forest, my senses heightened, my mind focused on my task, trying to ignore the feeling of unease that was growing stronger with each step that I took. I had seen all kinds of animals in the wilderness, but this trail felt different, as if something was following me, or as if I was not in my world anymore. It was like I was an intruder in a sacred place, and the forest was warning me to leave, and then I saw it. A massive figure standing in the shadows, its form obscured by the mist, its size almost unbelievable. It was tall, at least 8 feet, tall with thick fur that was matted and tangled, and with a muscular build that was both powerful and menacing. It was like something from a different time, a creature that should not exist, a monster that had emerged from the depths of the ancient forest, and the shadows that surrounded it were like a dark veil, protecting it from the world. I did not understand what I was seeing, but I knew that I was facing something very dangerous. My heart started to race, a cold dread washing over me as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing, but it was impossible. I tried to rationalize it, to find a scientific explanation, but my mind refused to believe anything that made sense. The creature was too big, its form too grotesque, its presence too unnatural. It was a vision from my nightmares, and it was standing right there, in front of my very eyes. Then it moved, its head turning towards me, and I saw its eyes. They were glowing red, not a natural glow, but a fierce, malevolent light that seemed to pierce through my very soul. And they were intelligent. I knew that this creature was more than just an animal. It was a sentient being, a force of nature, and it was looking directly at me. It was like it had been waiting for me. Then it growled. a bone-vibrating sound that seemed to shake the very ground beneath my feet. The sound was not like anything I had ever heard before. It was a mix of a roar and a growl, a guttural rumble that seemed to resonate deep within my bones. And then it vanished into the mist as if it had never been there, leaving only a silence, a sense of unease, and a lingering fear that I would carry with me for the rest of my life. And I knew that I had stumbled upon something that I could never explain. I didn't think, I didn't hesitate, I just ran. I fled, leaving the wounded elk behind, my mind consumed by a primal fear, my body fueled by adrenaline. I ran as fast as I could, not stopping, not looking back, until I was far from that clearing, far from the shadows, far from the entity, and back in familiar ground. I never felt more alone in my entire life. I didn't report what I saw. Who would believe me? They would think I was crazy, that I was delusional, that I had seen things that did not exist. I was a park ranger, a man of science and reason, and I was supposed to be an expert of the wilderness, and my reports would destroy everything that I had worked to achieve. So I kept my silence, I kept my secret. But I could not forget it. And now, sometimes, late at night, when the world is silent and the shadows are long, I see those red eyes reflecting in my daughter's picture frame. And I know it's still out there, and I think it was looking for me. The memory of those red eyes piercing through the mist still haunts me, a constant reminder of the creature that I saw in the whole rainforest. A reminder that there are things in this world that are beyond our understanding, beyond our control. I try to convince myself that it was just a hallucination, a product of exhaustion, of stress, of too much time alone in the wilderness. But deep down, I know that it was real, that it was a glimpse into something that was not meant to be seen, and that it was waiting for me. And the fear, the despair, and the terror, they will always be there, a constant companion in my life. I've always been a man of the wilderness, a protector of the natural world, someone who valued solitude and independence. My job as a park ranger was not just a career, it was also a calling, a way to connect with the land, to safeguard its secrets, and to protect its inhabitants. I always thought that I was strong, that I was fearless, that I was prepared for any challenge that the wilderness could throw at me. But that day, in that clearing, I realized that I was wrong, that my strength was just a facade, that my courage was nothing more than a mask, and that my knowledge of the forest was insignificant when facing something beyond its normal laws. I was not the protector, I was the victim. I've always prided myself on my ability to remain calm in the face of danger, to think clearly and to act decisively. But when I saw that creature, I lost all sense of reason, all control, all logic. My training, my experience, my instincts, none of them mattered. I was reduced to a primitive being, driven only by the primal instinct for survival. I was not brave, I was not fearless. I was just a man, facing something that was beyond my understanding, and the terror that I felt in that moment is something that has followed me ever since. I try to be a good father to my daughter, to be a strong role model, to teach her the importance of courage and resilience, but I carry this fear with me, a constant reminder of my own limitations, of my own vulnerabilities. And now I see that I am not the man that I was before, and that the man that I am now is a man that is deeply and utterly broken. And I'm starting to fear that that darkness, that fear, is being passed down to her. The whole rainforest, which I had once considered a place of beauty and peace, is now a place of dread, a symbol of the unknown, a reminder of the darkness that lurks beneath the surface of the natural world. The mist, which had always seemed ethereal and calming, now feels oppressive, suffocating, a veil that hides something that should not be seen. And the sounds of the forest, which had once been a source of comfort, now feel like whispers, moans, and groans of entities that I cannot understand. My safe place had now become a place of terror, a reminder of my own weakness, I've always dismissed the old local legends, the stories about creatures that roam the forests, about beings that are not of this world. I considered them just old, wives' tales, the product of overactive imaginations, of too much time alone in the wilderness. But now, I wonder if they were based on truth, if the creature that I saw was part of a greater reality, a force that had been lurking in the shadows for centuries, and if those stories are part of a long chain of encounters with something that we cannot rationalize or understand. The legends now seem more real than anything else. I see that red light sometimes reflected in the glass of my daughter's picture frame, a fleeting glimpse of something that should not be there, a constant reminder that the entity is still out there, that it is still watching me, that it is still waiting for my return. And it is a reminder that I am no longer safe, that the wilderness that was my home is now the place where my greatest fear resides. And I know that it is only a matter of time before that creature returns. My home has become a hunting ground, and I am the prey. The black, glassy rock in my hand was now warm to the touch, its surface smooth and almost pulsating, and I could feel its energy coursing through my veins, a strange mix of fear and determination, of dread and a strange sense of peace. The red glow in my daughter's picture frame was gone, yes, but the memory of those eyes, the image of that monstrous creature, was still there, haunting my thoughts, a constant reminder of the battle that I was about to face. The whispers my mind had become silent, but I knew that they would return, that the entity was still waiting, patiently, for my return, and I had to be ready to face it when the time came. And the weight of that knowledge was a heavy burden to carry. As I researched the ancient symbols that I had seen carved on the trees, I came across a story, a local legend that spoke of a powerful entity, a being of darkness that was said to dwell in the heart of the Yellowstone wilderness, an entity that had been worshipped by ancient civilizations, an entity that was said to have the power to manipulate time and space, to twist reality, and to lure unsuspecting victims into its web. The legend claimed that this entity had created the trail, that it had used it to lure people into its realm, and that it was still waiting, dormant, for the right moment to return to its former power. And I felt like that moment was getting closer, and I was the key to that return. It was a terrifying thought, and I knew that I was facing something that was beyond my comprehension, beyond my control, and more powerful than anything that I had ever imagined. I also remembered my grandmother, a woman of wisdom and folklore, a woman who had always been fascinated by the mysteries of nature and who had always warned me about the dangers of seeking out things that were better left undisturbed. She had told me stories of places where the veil between realities was thin, of areas that were filled with a dark energy, and of forces that were not meant to be challenged. And I remembered with unnerving clarity her words. "Some doors are better left closed, Finnegan, because the darkness that lies behind them will never let you go." It was as if she was trying to warn me, as if she had seen something that I was now about to face, and as if she knew the terror that was waiting for me, and that terror was now a constant companion. My attempts to warn others about the dangers of Yellowstone had all been in vain. My reports were dismissed as ramblings of a troubled mind, my fears were ignored, my warnings were silenced, and the hikers continued to disappear, their stories fading away into the collective memory, their faces becoming nothing more than a footnote in the history of the park. And the weight of that failure, the knowledge that I could not save others from the same fate that I had barely escaped, was a burden that I was carrying with me, a constant reminder that I was not strong enough to break free from the cycle of darkness that had been claiming lives for centuries. The voices of the missing hikers were now joining the whispers that I could hear in my head. I started to see shadows, not just in my dreams, but also in the waking world, fleeting glimpses of distorted forms that were moving in the periphery of my vision, as if the darkness was now starting to seep into my reality. I started to feel a strange sensation of disorientation, a feeling that time itself was becoming warped, as if the present was starting to merge with the past, and the future was becoming a terrifying blend of the two. The line between reality and nightmares was fading, and I was now trapped in a cycle of confusion, of dread, of terror. I knew that I had to make a choice, and I had to make it soon. I could either give in to the fear, surrender to the darkness, and let the entity claim me as its own, or I could embrace my destiny, return to Yellowstone, and face whatever was waiting for me there, even if it meant facing death itself. And as the voices grew louder and as the shadows grew darker, I realized that I was no longer just a cartographer. I was now also a soldier, a warrior, and I had to prepare for battle. I knew deep down that I had to return to the wilderness. My fate was now tied to that trail. My research also uncovered a ritual, an ancient ceremony that was said to be used to open the gateway to the other dimension, a series of actions that were designed to weaken the veil between realities, to allow the entities of the darkness to cross over into our world. The ritual involved the use of symbols, of stones of a specific location, and as I read the description, I knew with a chilling certainty that the clearing with the ancient stones was not just a random place. It was the heart of the ritual, the center of the entity's power, and I was now being drawn back to that place to play my part in its completion. My past was catching up to me, and I was about to discover what destiny was planning for me. I was also starting to understand that the trail was not just a path. It was also a connection, a link between different realities, a conduit for the energy of the entity. And I had picked up a piece of that connection, the black, glassy rock that I now carried with me, a constant reminder of the darkness that was now a part of me, a constant reminder of the doom that was waiting for me. And as I stared at the rock, I had a revelation. The darkness was not out there. The darkness was inside me, and my real battle was not to escape, but to understand it. And it was then that I knew that I had to return to Yellowstone and face the entity that was trying to consume me. It was a battle that I had to face alone. I had been running away, but now it was time for me to go back. The familiar path into the whole rainforest twisted and contorted before me, the trees growing taller and more menacing, their branches intertwined to form a dense canopy that blocked out the pale moonlight. The mist swirled around me, thick and suffocating, its tendrils reaching out like grasping claws, and the air grew colder, heavier, filled with the scent of damp earth and decay, a chilling reminder of the creature that was waiting for me. The forest was no longer a place of beauty. It was now a reflection of the turmoil in my soul, a manifestation of the fear that was consuming me, and a clear warning of the danger that was looming ahead. My familiar world was slowly becoming the world of my nightmares, and I knew I was now about to confront a horror that was beyond my comprehension. As I moved deeper into the forest, I started to hear the whispers again, now clearer, more defined, a chorus of voices that seemed to be calling my name, beckoning me towards the clearing, to the place where the entity had been waiting for centuries. My hand tightened around the black, glassy rock, and the rock pulsed with a warm, comforting light, a reminder of the power that was now flowing through me. I was no longer the same man that had fled from that place weeks before. I was now a warrior, a protector, a force that was ready to face the darkness. And as I walked towards it, I was ready for whatever the forest had to show me. The trail began to glow, a faint ethereal light that seemed to emanate from the ground itself, as if the forest was guiding my path, leading me towards the center of its power. And as I followed that light, I started to notice that the trees around me were changing. They were not just ancient and gnarled, they were now also marked with the same strange symbols that I had seen before, the same symbols that were now engraved in my soul. And in each of those symbols, I could see my own past, my own present, and my own future, all twisted, all contorted, all leading towards the same destination, the clearing where my journey would reach its end. It was as if I was now walking on my own tombstone. I reached the clearing, and the ancient stones were glowing with an intense red light, a beacon of malevolent energy that seemed to pulse with an ancient evil power. The shadows were moving, dancing, their forms more defined now, taking on the shape of monstrous creatures, reflections of my own fears, of my own doubts. And in the center of the clearing, I saw it, the creature. But it was not just the same figure that I had seen before. It was now larger, more menacing, more powerful, and I could feel its presence reaching out to me, as if it was trying to claim me as its own. And then the unexpected happened. The creature spoke, its voice a deep, guttural rumble that seemed to shake the very ground beneath my feet. But the words were not just random sounds, they were sentences, a message that was both familiar and unnerving. "You cannot escape your destiny, Cal," it said, its voice a distorted echo of my own. "You are part of me, and I am part of you. We have always been connected, since the beginning of time. It was not a trap. It was a reunion, and now it is time for you to come home." And in that moment, a horrifying realization crashed over me. I looked at my hands, at my uniform, at my reflection in the distorted images of the stones. And I saw that I was no longer just Finnegan O'Malley. I was now also the entity I was. Also the monster, I was also the darkness that I had been fighting against. And I finally understood the true nature of the beast. It was me, or at least a version of myself that had been waiting in the shadows for so long. It was not a beast, it was also a reflection of myself. The trail that I had followed was not just a path through the forest. It was also a path through my own soul, a journey into the depths of my own darkness. The entity that I had seen was not just a monster, it was also a reflection of my own fears, of my own doubts, of my own insecurities. I had been running from my own demons, and it had been chasing me all along. And my destiny was now to face that truth. The real monster was not out there, it was inside me, and I could no longer run away. My breath hitched in my throat, a sharp, ragged gasp, as the creature's words echoed in the silent clearing, a terrifying revelation that shattered everything I thought I knew about myself, about the world, about the nature of my journey. The monster that I had been running from, the entity that I had been trying to defeat, was not a separate being. It was a part of me, a reflection of my own darkness, a manifestation of my own fears. My hand tightened around the black, glassy rock, the rock pulsing with a frantic, erratic energy, a mirror of the chaos that was now unfolding within my soul. The world around me seemed to blur, the trees seemed to twist and groan, the shadows seemed to reach out like grasping claws, and my heart pounded in my chest as I struggled to process the truth that was now staring me in the face. The creature, my twisted reflection, started to move, its steps slow and deliberate, its form shifting and contorting, its eyes glowing with a malevolent light that seemed to pierce through my very soul. Its voice, a distorted echo of my own, spoke again, its words a chilling mix of fear and acceptance, of dread and longing. "You are part of me, Cal," it hissed, its voice a guttural rumble that seemed to vibrate deep within my bones. "We are connected, bound together by the darkness, forever trapped in this cycle of fear and pain. It is time to embrace your destiny, to surrender to the truth, to accept your place by my side." And that was the message that I had been running away from, and now that message had finally caught up with me. My mind raced, trying to make sense of the impossible, trying to reconcile the knowledge that I was both the hunter and the hunted, the victim and the oppressor. I had been so focused on the external monster that I had ignored the darkness that was within me, the fears that I had been trying to suppress, the doubts that I had been trying to silence. And now I was being forced to face that truth, to accept The totality of myself, the darkness and the light, the good and the evil, all that I had been trying to avoid for so long. I looked at my hands, at my uniform, at my reflection in the distorted images of the stones, and I saw that they were all tainted by the darkness, that I was no longer just Caleb Hudson, park ranger. I was now also a reflection of the entity, a part of the creature, that I had been fighting against, a pawn in a game that was far beyond my comprehension. The world around me seemed to shift and distort, the trees seemed to sway and groan, and the shadows seemed to take on a life of their own, as if they were responding to the chaos that was unfolding within me. The familiar was no longer familiar, and the strange was now a part of me. The creature, my monstrous reflection, reached out its hand towards me, its fingers long and twisted, its touch promising both power and corruption, an invitation to join its ranks, to embrace the darkness. That was now part of my soul, and for a moment I felt a strange pull, a seductive allure that was threatening to consume me, to drag me into the abyss of its power. I was tempted, so very tempted, to surrender, to accept the fact that I was now the monster that I had been hunting, and I was about to fall into that trap. My breath came in short, ragged gasps, my heart pounded in my chest, and my body trembled uncontrollably as I struggled to resist the influence of the entity, to fight against the darkness that was now trying to claim me as its own. I had run for so long. I had been hiding from my true nature and from the truth that I was meant to face. I was not just a protector, I was also a destroyer. And now I had the chance to embrace both. The temptation was so great that I could almost feel the darkness taking over. And it was in that moment that I was about to give in. The black, glassy rock in my hand pulsed again, its light growing stronger, and I remembered my daughter, her bright eyes, her infectious laughter, her unwavering love, and I realized that I could not give in, that I had to keep fighting, not just for myself, but also for her future, for her chance to live in a world that was free from the darkness that was now threatening to consume us all. And the temptation suddenly faded, leaving only the feeling of responsibility, of duty, of the absolute need to fight and to win. And then I saw it. In the distorted reflection of the stones, I noticed that the creature that was standing in front of me was not just a manifestation of my fears. It was also a reflection of my choices, of my failures, of my regrets, and of the darkness that had been growing inside me for so long. I was facing myself, and it was time for me to make a choice between the darkness and the light. And I knew with a certainty that defied all doubt what that choice was going to be. The creature, my monstrous reflection, stood before me, its red eyes burning into my soul, its form shifting and contorting, its voice a seductive whisper that promised power and freedom. But I knew that it was a lie, a deception, a trap that was designed to consume me. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the frantic beating of my heart, and I focused on the black, glassy rock in my hand, channeling its energy, using it as a conduit to connect with the source of my own strength. And I realized that the rock was not just an object, it was also a part of me, a symbol of my own resilience, of my own courage, and of my own capacity for love. And I knew that in order to stop the monster, I had to embrace it, and I had to forgive it. It was a spiritual battle, and not a physical one. I stepped forward towards the creature, not with fear, not with anger, but with a newfound sense of acceptance, with a profound understanding that the monster was not an external force, but a reflection of my own inner turmoil, a manifestation of my own fears, of my own doubts. And as I approached it, I realized that I had been running from the wrong monster, and that my real battle was not to defeat the darkness, but to understand it, to accept it, and to integrate it into the totality of myself. And that I had to fight for the side of the light. The creature started to recoil, its form flickering, its power diminishing, as if it was afraid of the love that I was now radiating, of the compassion that was now flowing through me, of the strength that I had discovered within my own soul. Its voice grew weaker, less menacing, and it started to plead, to beg me, to give in to its darkness, to embrace its twisted reality. But I refused to listen. My mind focused on my purpose, my will set on breaking free from the cycle of terror. And I also understood that if I gave in, the darkness would not just consume me, it would consume everyone. It was not just my fight anymore. I closed my eyes and I focused my energy, not to resist the darkness, but to embrace it, to transform it, to transmute it into light. And as I did, the black glassy rock in my hand began to pulse with a bright white light, a force of pure energy that seemed to penetrate every corner of the clearing, that seemed to illuminate the very fabric of reality. And in that light, I saw the true nature of the entity. I understood its pain, its despair, its loneliness, and I felt a profound sense of compassion, a deep desire to heal its wounds, to bring it back from the darkness. I did not have to destroy it, to conquer it, or to defeat it. I had to understand it, to accept it, and to forgive it. And in that, I found my true power. It was then that I understood that the biggest battle is the battle against our own demons, and I had just won. I opened my eyes and I saw that the monstrous reflection was fading, its form dissolving into nothingness, its darkness transforming into light, and the clearing around me started to shift and change, becoming a place of peace, of tranquility, of serene beauty, bathed in a soft golden light. And I realized that my journey was not over, but it was now changing into something new, something different. And I was now ready for the challenge. I was now ready to face the future. I finally understood that courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to face it head on, to embrace the darkness that was within, and to choose to follow the light. I had been trapped in the cycle of terror, yes, but I had also found a way to break free, not by escaping the darkness, but by accepting it, by understanding it, and by using it to empower myself. I was no longer just a park ranger. I was now a warrior, a healer, a traveler between realities, and a force that was capable of bending the very fabric of time and space. And as I faced the entity, I knew that I was ready to claim my own destiny, and that I was ready to embrace whatever fate had in store for me. I had faced the wilderness, and now I had found my own path. And that path was within myself. And in that understanding, I found my power. The voice that echoed in the void was not just a sound, it was a force, a wave of energy that seemed to resonate deep within my very being, shaking the foundations of my soul and revealing the truth that I had been trying to ignore. The landscape around me shifted and contorted, the chaotic blend of colors transforming into a mirror, a reflection of my own inner darkness, my own fears, my own doubts. And in that reflection, I saw a figure, a monstrous entity that was not just an enemy. It was also a part of me, the manifestation of my own corrupted soul, the personification of my most primal fears. It was me, but twisted, distorted, a grotesque reflection of all the darkness that I was carrying within my heart. And I was now about to face it, alone. The black, glassy rock in my hand pulsed with a fierce white light, its energy coursing through my veins, giving me the strength to face the impossible, to confront the darkness, and to claim my own destiny. And as I looked at it, I realized that it was not just a tool, a weapon, or a conduit for power. It was also a symbol of my own resilience, of my own courage, and of my own capacity for love. And I knew that in order to stop the monster, I had to embrace it, and I had to forgive it. It was a spiritual battle, and not a physical one. I stepped forward, towards the monstrous reflection, my hand still gripping the rock, my body trembling with the force of the energy that was flowing through me, my mind focused on my purpose. And as I moved, the entity seemed to recoil, as if it was afraid of the light that was emanating from me, as if it was sensing the strength that was now burning within my soul. I closed my eyes, and I focused all my energy, all my will and all of my heart in the rock, and I let the force take over me. And as I did, the world started to shake. The monstrous reflection started to flicker, its form unstable, its power diminishing, and its voice was now becoming a cry of pain, a desperate plea for mercy. The world around me started to shatter. The twisted landscape was dissolving into nothingness, and the dimension was starting to collapse. I could feel the energy of the entity fading, its influence diminishing, its hold on this reality weakening. And then I understood what I had to do. It was not about killing the monster or destroying the darkness. It was about accepting it, about understanding it, about forgiving it. It was a spiritual battle, and not a physical one. I opened my eyes, and I focused on the black, glassy rock, and I channeled all of my power, all of my energy, all of my love towards the entity, and as I did, the rock shone brighter, a pure, white light that seemed to penetrate every corner of the dimension. A light that was not just a source of power, but also a source of compassion, of understanding, of forgiveness. The monster looked at me, and it was then that I realized it was not a monster. It was me, and in that moment, I forgave it. The monster smiled, a twisted smile of acceptance, and its form faded away, its presence dissolving into nothingness. And the dimension itself started to collapse, the landscape dissolving, the colors fading, and the very fabric of reality was unraveling around me. I had faced the darkness, and I had chosen to embrace the light, not just in the world around me, but also in the depths of my own soul, and that choice had changed everything. My transformation was now complete. I had become something that was more than just human, and it was now time to return home. I found myself standing back in the clearing, the ancient stones now silent, their surfaces smooth and unmarked. The trail that had led me to this place now vanished, as if it had never existed. The black, glassy rock in my hand was now cool, its light dormant, its power at peace. I had survived, yes, but I knew that I was no longer the same. I had faced my own darkness, and I had conquered my own demons, and I had emerged from this nightmare a stronger, wiser, more resilient, and infinitely more human man. I had walked to the edge of madness, and I had returned, forever changed by the journey and by the understanding of the darkness that is part of my very soul. And now I had made peace with it. It was now part of me, but it would not define who I was. I had returned, yes, but sometimes I still wonder if I had truly escaped that place, and if the trail and its darkness will ever truly let me go. I had survived, but I wasn't sure if I had truly won. The morning sun cast a warm, golden light over the whole rainforest. The familiar landscape now bathed in an ethereal glow that seemed to hum with a quiet, subtle energy. I stepped out of the clearing, the door closing gently behind me, and I looked back at the structure, now pristine and whole, as if nothing had ever happened. It was no longer a place of fear, no longer a source of dread. It was now a sanctuary, a testament to the power of magic, a symbol of the resilience of the human spirit. And I knew that I had been changed by that place, that I was no longer just a park ranger. I was now a guardian of its secrets, a protector of its soul. My purpose was now clear. The long-term consequences of my actions were unknown. I had faced my own darkness, I had conquered my own demons, and I had broken free from the cycle of terror. But I did not know what the future held. I did not know if the entity was truly gone, or if it was just lurking in the shadows, waiting for another opportunity to return. But I knew that I had to remain vigilant, that I had to protect the wilderness from the forces of the unknown, and that I had to teach others to confront their own fears, to embrace the light that was within, and to never give in to despair. And I also knew that I had changed. And the old Cal, the man that had always loved the wilderness, was no longer here. I tried to return to my life as a park ranger, to my duty of protecting the natural world, to my love of the forest, but my perspective was now completely altered. I was now seeing the world through a new lens, a lens that was aware of the hidden dimensions, of the mysteries that lurked beneath the surface of reality, of the magic that was woven into the very fabric of the universe. My work as a protector was now about more than just the physical world. It was also about safeguarding the spiritual, about preserving the balance of time and nature. The wilderness to me had become a living entity, a sentient being that I had to protect. I decided to leave Yellowstone, to seek a new path, a different purpose for my life. I could no longer pretend that I had not seen what I had seen, that I had not experienced what I had experienced, and I could no longer ignore the responsibility that had been placed upon me. The world was now different, and my mission was to protect it. I was now a warrior, seeking to protect the world from the unknown, but also seeking to understand it, and I would never be the same again. I knew that the hikers that had disappeared were now lost in the darkness of that other reality, that their souls had been consumed by the entity, and that their stories would never be told. But I hoped that my actions had somehow broken the cycle, that I had somehow prevented the darkness from claiming any more victims. It was a desperate hope, yes, but it was the only thing that was keeping me moving forward. And I knew that if I had fallen, so many others would have too. It was my responsibility now to save others from my fate. My journey had taken me to the depths of my own soul, and I had emerged from that darkness a changed man, stronger, wiser, more resilient, but also deeply marked by the pain of what I had witnessed. And in the end, I realized that my love for the wilderness was still there, but it was now tinged with a sense of responsibility, a need to protect its secrets, to safeguard its magic, and to warn others of the darkness that was hidden within its embrace. I was a cartographer, yes, but my map was now bigger than any world I had ever charted. The wilderness had changed me, and I had finally learned how to be brave. My journey had been a painful one, but it was one that I had to face, and I was stronger because of it. I still carry the black, glassy rock with me, a reminder of the trail, of the clearing, of the darkness that I had faced, and of the darkness that still lurks in the world, and the darkness that will always be a part of me. I still feel the pull of Yellowstone, the call of the wilderness, but now I know that the real adventure is not about exploring the world around me. It's about understanding the mysteries that are hidden within my own soul. I do not map trails anymore, I map souls. And that is the greatest discovery of all. I still work as a park ranger in the Pacific Northwest, and I still carry the black, glassy rock with me, a reminder of the darkness that I had faced, and of the light that I had chosen to embrace. I have never seen the creature again, nor do I expect that to happen. But I still feel its presence in the shadows, in the quiet corners of the wilderness, and I know that I will never truly be free from the terror that it represents. And I am now okay with it. I was broken, but now I am stronger than ever. This is my story, a glimpse into the darkness that exists beyond our understanding, and how that darkness lives inside of us. Have you ever faced your own demons? Have you ever encountered something that you couldn't explain? Share your story in the comments below. And if you were captivated by this journey, click on the next video, which will show you another glimpse of the strange and the bizarre, and see what other horrors are hidden beneath the veil of reality. And remember, the real wilderness is not out there, it's within us. Title: I'm a native park ranger. Stay away from this forest. 16/01/25. My name is Mateus Silva, and I worked as a ranger patrolling the waterways of the Amazon basin. They call it the lungs of the world, but to me, it was always more like a heart that beat with a rhythm both familiar and terrifying. The river itself felt alive, not just in the obvious ways with the teeming life beneath its surface, but with something older, something more primal. I suppose that's why I never completely dismissed the old tales, the whispered legends of the forest. Most folks in the cities, they laugh at the stories of the Iara, the siren of the river, a beautiful woman with an enchanting song who lures men to their watery graves. They call it folklore, bedtime stories to keep children from wandering off at night. But out here, in the deep heart of the Amazon, where the dense ancient trees tower over the waterways, casting long, eerie shadows, where the air itself vibrates with a kind of untamed energy, those tales felt less like stories and more like warnings. Warnings that I, in my youthful arrogance, chose to ignore. Until one night, when the river decided to remind me of its power. It was a routine patrol, nothing unusual. The moon was a silver coin hanging in the inky sky, casting a pale glow. Over the dark water, the humid air hung heavy, thick with the scent of damp earth and the sweet, cloying aroma of unseen blossoms. My partner, João, sat at the helm of our small patrol boat, his face etched with the wisdom of years spent on the river. He was a man of few words, but his silence spoke volumes. He was the kind of man who seemed to understand the river, who moved within its rhythms as if he were part of its flow. Me? I was still trying to find my place, still trying to understand the language the river spoke. The sounds of the jungle were a constant companion, a symphony of chirps, croaks, and rustles that rose and fell like the tide. It was a comforting sound in a way, a reminder of the vibrant, untamed life that surrounded us. But then it started. It began as a whisper, a subtle shift in the air that made the hair on my arms stand on end. It was a song, a woman's voice, clear and haunting, as pure as the water that flowed beneath our boat. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, echoing through the trees and across the water. It was beautiful, intoxicating, a melody that seemed to resonate deep within my very bones. It filled me with a longing I couldn't explain, a primal urge to abandon everything, to throw myself into the depths of the river. My heart pounded against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the steady rhythm of the engine. I felt a pull, a magnetic force drawing me towards the water, towards the source of that ethereal music. I was no longer myself. I was just a vessel for this all-consuming desire. I remember standing up, my legs feeling like lead, moving as if under some unseen influence. I reached out, my fingers brushing against the cool surface of the river. The water seemed to shimmer, to glow with an inner light. And then I saw her. She emerged from the depths, a vision of impossible beauty. Her long, dark hair flowed around her like a living curtain, adorned with what looked like luminous pearls. Her skin was the color of moonlight on water, and her eyes, those piercing emerald eyes, seemed to burn into my soul. She was beckoning, me calling my name with a voice that was both seductive and heart-wrenching. Her song grew stronger, more intense, weaving around me like a net, pulling me closer and closer to the edge. I felt a strange calm descend over me, a sense of peace and belonging that I had never experienced before. I wanted to be with her, to merge with the water, to lose myself in her eternal embrace. But then, João saw, he recognized the glassy look in my eyes, the unnatural stillness that had overtaken me. He reacted immediately, his weathered hands gripping my arm with surprising strength. He pulled me away from the railing, his voice a harsh command that cut through the seductive melody of the Iara. He was shouting at me, pleading with me, his words a desperate attempt to break the spell that had taken hold of me. "Matt, wake up. She's trying to take you. Fight it." He wrestled me to the ground, his body a solid wall against the seductive call of the river. He covered my ears, pressing his hands firmly against them, trying to shut out the song that had bewitched me. He shouted, prayed, did anything he could think of to break the Iara's hold on me. It was like I was fighting against the current, a desperate struggle to regain control of my own mind. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, the pull lessened. The music faded, the colors of the river dimmed, the image of the beautiful woman wavered and disappeared. I felt a cold, sharp fear replace the seductive calm, a stark realization of how close I had come to death. I saw the Iara one last time, her face contorted with a mixture of anger and disappointment, before she vanished beneath the surface of the river. The river, once so alluring, suddenly felt menacing, a dark and treacherous place. Juon saved me that night. He pulled me back from the brink, back from the depths of the river's embrace. He said it wasn't the first time he'd witnessed the Iara's pull, that many men had fallen to her song over the years. He had seen the scars, the missing souls, the silent grief that lingered in the villages along the riverbanks. He had come close, himself once, and carried the reminder of that encounter in the form of an odd, hand-shaped scar that seemed to glow from beneath his skin. I never went back to patrolling the river after that. I couldn't bear the thought of it. I took a desk job far away from the water, and I tried to forget. I tried to tell myself it was just a bad dream, a hallucination, a product of my overactive imagination. But I know, deep down, that it was real. And I know that even miles away, I can still hear the faintest echo of her song, a haunting melody that will forever be etched in my memory. Juon, my partner, he wasn't just a fellow ranger. He was like a father figure to me, a link to the old ways of the river. He had the quiet strength of a man who had lived a hard life and come out the other side, not unscathed, but wiser. His face was a road map of his years on the river, lined and weathered by the sun, rain, and the countless hours spent under the watchful eyes of the Amazon's ancient trees. He was a man of few words, preferring action to lengthy explanations, but his silence spoke volumes. It spoke of a deep respect for the river, a quiet understanding of its power and its mysteries. He wasn't just a man of the river, he was a part of it. He moved with its rhythm, navigated its currents like an extension of his own being. He knew the hidden sandbars, the treacherous eddies, the places where the river held its breath. He could read the signs of the jungle, the subtle shifts in the wind, the rustling of leaves that spoke of unseen creatures lurking nearby. I had always admired him, wanted to be like him. But the night I encountered the Iara, I realized how little I truly knew about the world, about myself. There was a contradiction about Juon that I had only started to notice more acutely after that night. He was a man who respected the power of the river, who was cautious and observant, yet he carried a physical reminder of how close he had come to succumbing to the Iara's lure. The scar on his arm, the perfect handprint, it was a constant reminder of the battle he had fought, a testament to the power of the water spirit, and it seemed to be at odds with his otherwise calm and self-assured demeanor. He seemed almost ashamed of it, often concealing it under the sleeve of his uniform. I, on the other hand, was always the headstrong one. I had grown up with the old stories, with the tales of the Iara and other creatures of the forest, but I always approached them with a skepticism that bordered on arrogance. I thought that I was too smart, too grounded to fall victim to such silly legends. My ambition to become a ranger, to serve and protect the river, was fueled by a desire to prove myself, not just to others, but to myself as well. That arrogance, it was my undoing. It was why I so readily fell under the spell of the Iara's song. The Iara, she was a paradox, a being of terrible beauty, a predator disguised as a savior. The old legends say that she was once a beautiful woman, a skilled hunter who was thrown into the river as punishment for her jealousy and pride. She was transformed into a creature of the water, her beauty enhanced, her voice made enchanting, but her heart consumed by a deep, insatiable need for revenge. They say that she lures men to their deaths, not just for the pleasure of it, but to steal their life force, to feed on their souls. The Iara is a warning, a reminder of the dangers of unchecked desire, of the seductive power of beauty, and the tragic consequences of jealousy and revenge. The river itself, it was more than just a body of water. It was a living entity, a force of nature that could be both benevolent and malevolent, nurturing and destructive. It reflected the complex character of the Iara, a place of both life and death, beauty and horror. The water, under the moonlight, seemed to shimmer and shift, as if it was hiding something, as if it was breathing, alive. It held the weight of centuries within its depths, secrets that were better left undisturbed. The river was the stage upon which our story unfolded, an active participant, not just a passive setting. Our small patrol boat, it was our only link to the world outside the jungle, a symbol of safety and security in the vast, untamed wilderness. It had seen its share of adventures, its hull dented and scarred from encounters with fallen trees and hidden rocks. It was the silent witness to the countless hours we spent on the river, the countless conversations we shared under the canopy of the trees. It was more than just a boat. It was our refuge, our home away from home. The small town where I now work, it was the complete opposite of the river, a place of order and predictability. It was a place where the old stories were just that, stories. The streets were paved, the buildings were made of brick and concrete. There were no secrets to be found in the concrete or the artificial lights of the town. But even there, even miles away from the river, I could still feel its pull, its presence, a constant reminder of the night that changed my life forever. It was as if the river had left its mark on me, a subtle but indelible stain that I could never wash away. The desk job was supposed to be a safe haven, a refuge from the river's haunting presence. I traded my patrol uniform for a suit and tie, the roar of the engine for the clickety-clack of keyboards, the ever-present scent of the jungle with a sterile smell of air conditioning. It was a life of routines and predictability, devoid of the thrill and the danger of the river. It should have been the perfect cure for my troubled mind. But the river, it refused to let me go. It was in my dreams, in the way the rain pattered against the window, in the way the wind whispered through the trees outside my office. I began to see her everywhere, in the reflections on polished surfaces, in the shadows that stretched across my office walls, in the fleeting glimpses of dark-haired women in the street. It was as if the Iara had somehow followed me, her presence a constant reminder of my close encounter with death. I tried to ignore it, to convince myself that it was just my imagination, but the more I tried to bury the memory, the more intense it became. I started to feel like I was losing my sanity. The nightmares intensified. I would wake up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding, the Iara's song echoing in my ears. Sometimes I dreamed that I was underwater with her, her face inches from mine, her emerald eyes staring into my soul. And then I'd wake up in a gasp, my lungs burning for air, and with the chilling realization that sometimes the nightmares didn't feel like nightmares at all. Sometimes the lure of her song felt like a welcome embrace, a return to a place where I belonged. One day, a new ranger arrived at the station. His name was Carlos, a young man with the same eagerness and naivete that I had had before the encounter with the Iara. He was assigned to my old patrol area, the same stretch of the river where I had seen her. The news sent a shiver of fear down my spine. I tried to warn him, tried to tell him about the Iara, but my words sounded like the ramblings of a madman. He just laughed it off, called them stories to scare children. I knew I couldn't let it go. I felt a responsibility, a moral obligation to protect him. It was a twisted sense of duty, but I couldn't shake it. I knew that if Carlos went to the river, he'd be vulnerable, susceptible to the Iara's song. I knew that I had to do something, that I couldn't just sit there and let him walk into danger. I spent countless nights poring over maps and reports, trying to find some way to prevent another tragedy. I started to investigate the old cases, the stories of other men who had vanished along the river, men who had been seduced by the Iara's song. I discovered that the incidents were far more frequent than anyone had ever admitted, that the Iara wasn't just a myth, but a very real and very dangerous threat. The more I uncovered, the more I realized that I wasn't just protecting Carlos, I was protecting others as well. The choice was clear. I was not going to be able to turn my back. My investigation took me to a small, dusty archive, a place that had been forgotten by the rest of the city. I found old logbooks filled with handwritten accounts of strange occurrences along the river, stories that were never officially documented. I found a recurring pattern, a link between the Iara's appearances and the phases of the moon, a clue. That seemed to be more significant than I initially thought. It was then I realized that she wasn't a random force of nature, but something far more intelligent, a being with a plan of her own. I went back to Jerome, sought him out. I hadn't seen him since I'd left the river patrol, but I knew that he'd understand. He listened patiently as I recounted my discoveries, his face impassive. When I was finished, he simply looked at me, his eyes filled with a mix of sadness and resignation. "She is not going to let you forget," he said. "You will never truly be free of the river." He showed me an old map, one that had belonged to his grandfather, a map that charted the hidden currents and the dangerous places along the river. He pointed to a specific location, a place where the river widened and the water flowed deep and still. "That is where she resides," he said, his voice low and grave. "That is where she draws her power from." He told me that to defeat her, I would have to confront her on her own territory. It was a terrifying prospect. It meant returning to the river, confronting the source of my nightmares. But it was also a chance to put an end to the Iara's reign of terror, to protect the men who were still at risk of falling prey to her seductive song. I made the decision. I had to go back. I had to face the darkness that lurked beneath the surface. My moral compass had found its direction, and I could not just turn my back on the Iara. Every second I hesitated was a second closer to her next victim. The journey back to the river was a journey back to my past, a revisiting of the fears and insecurities that I had tried so hard to suppress. I kept thinking about my mother, a woman who was always so full of life, so full of stories. She had always warned me about the dangers that lurked in the shadows, the creatures that prowled in the darkness. "Monsters are real, Matt," she used. To say, they live in our hearts, in our fears, and in the places where we least expect them. I had dismissed her words then, but now, after everything I had seen, I realized how right she was. I remembered her telling me stories of the Amazon, of the powerful spirits that lived there, of the beauty that hid the dark secrets that lurked beneath the surface. She always warned me to be cautious, to never underestimate the power of the jungle, of the river. It was strange how clear those memories had become as I got closer and closer to the Amazon. I was also haunted by my last conversation with Jerome, his words echoing in my mind like a constant refrain. "She is not going to let you forget." What did he mean by that? Was he implying that the Iara was somehow linked to me, that I was destined to be entangled in her web? I started to consider the idea that my encounter with her hadn't been random. Maybe I was part of something much bigger. Maybe my life had been building towards this moment, towards this confrontation. With the river's siren, I also had fleeting memories of Carlos. He was young, full of bravado and ambition. He reminded me so much of my younger self before the Iara. He had the same hunger, the same recklessness that had almost cost me my life. I felt an overwhelming sense of guilt, knowing that if something happened to him, I would never be able to forgive myself. He was just another pawn in the Iara's game. I started to see the connections between the different events, the seemingly random encounters, the unsettling coincidences. It was as if the threads of fate were being woven around me, pulling me towards the inevitable confrontation with the Iara. It felt like a trap, a carefully constructed maze that I had to navigate if I ever hoped to break free from her hold on me. The more I thought, the less random all of this seemed. My research had led me to an old legend, a story of a shaman who had managed to defeat the Iara many years ago. It was a story that had been passed down through generations, a secret that had been guarded by the local tribes. The shaman hadn't defeated her through violence or brute force, but through a ritual, a song that could counter her own. I started to believe that maybe that was my way out, a way that would not result in my death or hers, a way that was less cruel and destructive. I found an old woman who lived in a small village far up the river. They said she was the last keeper of the old ways, a descendant of the shaman from the legend. She was reluctant to help me at first, but after I showed her the silver crucifix that Chuon had given me, her eyes widened with a mixture of recognition and fear. She told me that the Iara's power was growing, that she was drawing strength from the souls that she had claimed over the years. She revealed to me, in a mix of Portuguese and her native language, that I held a great responsibility. The fate of the river depended on my ability to confront and defeat the Iara. I had a purpose in all of this, even if it was a terrible burden to carry. The old woman started teaching me the ritual, the ancient song that had been passed down through generations, a counter melody to the Iara's seductive call. It was a complex ritual filled with symbolism and ancient power, a powerful chant that resonated with the very soul of the river. The words were strange, filled with the power of the Amazon, and they spoke to a part of me that I never knew existed. I spent days learning, memorizing the chants, internalizing the ancient rhythm. Each word was like a key to unlocking a door that I hadn't known was there. It was as if the ancient spirits of the river were guiding me, preparing me for the battle that was to come. My doubts and fears started to recede, replaced with the resolve of one ready to fight. My life had a purpose now, something more important than myself. The night I returned to the river, the moon was a sliver of white in the inky sky, casting long, eerie shadows across the water's surface. The air was thick and heavy, charged with an unnatural stillness that made the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. It was as if the river itself was holding its breath, waiting for me, waiting for the inevitable confrontation with the Iara. The jungle around me was silent, the usual sounds of the night creatures muted and subdued, as if they too sensed the tension in the air. It was a landscape of shadows, a world of anticipation and dread. I followed the old map, guided by the stars and the ancient wisdom of the old woman, until I reached the place where the river widened and the water flowed deep and still. It was a place of unnatural calm, a pool of dark, reflective water surrounded by towering trees that seemed to lean in as if trying to keep its secrets hidden. The silence was almost deafening, a blanket of stillness that pressed in on me, making me feel like I was the only living soul in that vast, dark expanse. I stepped onto the shore, the soft earth giving way beneath my boots, the smell of damp soil and decaying leaves filling my nostrils. I could feel the presence of the Iara all around me, a subtle energy that pulsed in the air, a silent whisper that seemed to penetrate the depths of my soul. I wasn't alone, I knew that now. I was close, very close. I started the ritual, the ancient song that the old woman had taught me. My voice trembled at first, but as I sang, the words began to resonate within me, filling me with a strength and a resolve that I didn't know I possessed. The air around me seemed to shimmer and vibrate, the energy of the river responding to the power of the ancient chant. I felt a connection to the river, a link to the past, a feeling that I was finally on the right path. And then I saw her. She emerged from the depths of the water, rising slowly like a dark, ethereal vision. Her long black hair flowed around her like a living veil, and her emerald eyes burned with an intense, mesmerizing glow. She was more beautiful than I remembered, more captivating, her presence so alluring that my heart nearly stopped at its sheer magnitude. She was a force of nature, both magnificent and terrifying. Her song began, a haunting melody that seemed to wrap around me, pulling me towards the water with irresistible force. It was the same song that had almost claimed my life before, but this time I was prepared. I focused my mind on the ancient chants, letting their power flow through me, creating a shield against her seductive call. My own song became a powerful counterpoint to hers, a battle of wills between the ancient powers of the river. She was surprised. I could see it in the flicker of her eyes, the subtle shift in her expression. She hadn't expected me to resist. She had believed that I was still under her control. I could see the doubt in her face. the hint of fear that flickered in her gaze. And it was then that I realized she wasn't invincible, she was vulnerable. But then a ripple spread across the water's surface, and the image of the Yara shimmered, distorted for a second that revealed her true form, a monstrous creature with sharp teeth, claw-like hands, and skin that appeared scaled. This was not the beautiful woman from my nightmares, but something much older, much more monstrous, with rage in her eyes and a mouth filled with jagged, hungry teeth. It was a shock that almost broke my concentration, the sudden transformation. Catching me off guard, I almost lost my focus, the fear returning as I saw the creature, the real Yara, in all of her horrific glory. She lunged toward me, her voice transforming into a screech of rage and frustration. The water churned and swirled around us, as if the river itself was reacting to the ferocity of her attack. She was no longer trying to seduce me, she was trying to destroy me, to drag me down into the depths, to silence me forever. And it was then that the real fight began. It wasn't a battle of songs or wills, but a struggle for survival, a fight against the very embodiment of fear and darkness. I felt an icy hand grab at my ankle, pulling me down. It was cold, the feeling was bone-chilling. I looked at it. It was not the beautiful hands I remembered. It was a hand covered in scales and talons, the hand of a monster, not a beautiful woman. The water was cold, almost shockingly so, as the Yara dragged me down into the river's depths. The pressure built in my chest, my lungs burning for air, my vision blurring as the dark water closed over me. I could feel her claws digging into my skin, her sharp teeth snapping close to my face. The fear was overwhelming, a cold dread that threatened to paralyze me, but I forced myself to fight back. I fought against her, kicking and thrashing, trying to break free from her grip. I remembered the old woman's words, her instructions for the final part of the ritual. I had to find a way to cut off her connection to the river, to weaken her power, to expose her true self. I reached for the silver crucifix that João had given me, the object that I carried as a symbol of hope. It seemed to glow with a faint light beneath the water, its power resonating with the ancient chants that I had learned. I plunged the crucifix towards her scaly, monstrous hand. Her skin sizzled and burned at the touch, as if she had come into contact with a white-hot iron. She shrieked with pain and anger, her grip weakening for just a second. It was the opening I needed. I wrenched myself free, kicking myself upwards, back towards the surface. I broke through the water, gulping in lungfuls of air, my body shaking from exhaustion and terror. The Yara was still there, her form flickering, the dark scales disappearing, and the beautiful woman reappearing again. She was wounded, but not defeated. I could see the anger in her eyes, the hate that burned like fire. It seemed like she was struggling to keep her true form from showing. The song began again, a desperate plea that seemed more like a cry of pain than a seductive melody. She was weakened, vulnerable, but she was still dangerous. I knew that I had to finish it, that I had to complete the ritual to finally free myself from her grasp. I began to sing the ancient chants again, my voice stronger, my resolve hardened, the power of the river surging through me. The water churned and swirled around us, the force of the battle creating a whirlpool that threatened to pull us both under. The trees around us seemed to sway and creak, as if the ancient spirits of the jungle were witnessing the conflict. The air was charged with an unnatural energy, a palpable tension that threatened to tear the world apart. The Yara's form flickered again, her beautiful face contorted in a mixture of agony and rage. The scales returned, her teeth snapped. She reached for me once more. I had to do something. I had to end this. And then it happened. I saw her face, her real face, not that of the monster, not that of a beautiful woman. It was a young woman's face full of anger, pain, and unspeakable sadness. She wasn't an evil spirit, she was a tormented soul. The understanding hit me hard. I stopped singing. The chants faded from my lips. The power that had surged through me evaporated. The river became calm once more. I looked at her, my eyes filled with compassion instead of hatred, understanding instead of fear. The Iara, the monster, the beautiful woman, the tormented soul, she stared back. And in that moment, we both froze. The moment of horror faded, and it was replaced by what I did not expect, mutual understanding. The silence that followed was profound, a stark contrast to the chaotic battle that had just transpired. The river, once churning and turbulent, had calmed. The Iara, her monstrous form flickering between the woman and the creature, remained suspended in the water, her gaze locked on mine. It was then that I realized the true nature of her pain, a torment that echoed through the centuries, a sorrow that had twisted her into the monster I had faced. It wasn't just about revenge, not just about stealing the life force of men. It was about something more profound, something deeply personal. It was about being alone, abandoned, forgotten. And in that moment, I understood the true depths of her suffering. My fear began to recede, replaced by a surge of empathy, of compassion for the tormented soul that stood before me. I saw the reflection of my own fears, my own insecurities, in her pain. I finally understood the true meaning of my mother's words about the monsters that lived in the shadows and in our hearts. The true monsters were not the creatures of the legends, but the fear and pain that consumed us all. And it was something that we were all capable of overcoming. I realized that I had never truly understood the meaning of courage. I had always thought it was the absence of fear, the ability to face danger without hesitation. But I had learned that true courage was something different. It was the ability to face fear and pain, not just those of the monster that haunted my dreams, but also those inside of me. It was the decision to keep going in spite of the fear, and to embrace the challenges of life and growth, even if it meant facing our deepest doubts and vulnerabilities. It was about having the guts to feel, even when that feeling is not a pleasant one. And it was that type of courage that I finally embraced. My anger towards the Iara dissolved, replaced by a profound sense of understanding. She wasn't a malevolent spirit, not really. She was a victim of her own pain, her own trauma, trapped in a cycle of torment and revenge. And I knew with a certainty that resonated deep within my soul that the only way to break that cycle was not through violence, but through compassion, through forgiveness. It was then that I understood the ancient ways of the Amazon. It wasn't about good and evil. It was about restoring the balance, to understand the nature of the world in all of its different facets. I lowered my hand, the silver crucifix falling from my grasp, sinking slowly towards the bottom of the river. It was a symbolic gesture, a release of the anger and fear that had driven me, that had consumed me for so long. The Iara watched me, her eyes filled with a strange mix of curiosity and confusion, as I started singing again. I did not sing the ancient chant. I sang a different song. It was a melody that came from the heart, not from the learned words of an old ritual. It was a song of forgiveness, of understanding, of acceptance. As I sang, the Iara's form began to shift, the monstrous scales fading, the sharp teeth disappearing. She slowly returned to her original form, the beautiful woman with long, dark hair and emerald eyes, but her face was no longer contorted with rage or sorrow. She looked peaceful, almost serene, as if the torment of the ages was finally coming to an end. My actions had made her human. It had allowed her to feel. She closed her eyes, a single tear escaping and fading into the river. In that moment, I knew the battle was over, the cycle broken, the torment finally at an end. My time in the small office ended. I no longer was going to ignore the river. I was not going to ignore her and the stories it had to tell. After that day, everything changed. I felt a calmness, a sense of purpose that had been missing. The nightmares stopped, the constant fear fading into the past. I started to patrol the river again, but not as the ranger I used to be. I was something more than that. I was a guardian, a protector, a seeker of balance. I had overcome my own demons, and in the process, had become something else. I had also started to understand the words that Joan had spoken that night, that she would not let me forget. What he meant wasn't that she would come for me, but that I would never be able to leave her behind. My experience with the Iara had become a part of me, a part that had changed me forever. And with that understanding came the understanding of the interconnectedness of everything, the good, the bad, the beautiful, and the terrifying. And finally, I understood that my life, my journey, would not be the same. The river was no longer a source of fear, but a place of understanding, of profound connection to the past and to the mysteries of the world. I learned to navigate its currents with respect and admiration, to move within its rhythms as if I were a part of its flow. I learned to read the signs of the jungle, the subtle shifts in the wind, the rustling of leaves that spoke of unseen creatures lurking nearby. I had become the man that I always aspired to be, but with the deep understanding of the things that truly mattered, and also the things that I had not understood before. I continued to investigate the old stories, the legends of the Amazon, the tales of the creatures that inhabited the forest and the waterways. I realized that the Iara was not the only spirit that had become twisted and corrupted by pain and sorrow. There were other beings, ancient and powerful, trapped in cycles of suffering, waiting for someone to break the chains of their tormented past. I realized that I had a role to play, a responsibility to not just protect the river, but to help those who were lost, to bring balance to the world. I had not seen Joan since that night, when he showed me the map, the one that had belonged to his grandfather. But I had never stopped thinking about him. He had been the one who had saved my life, who had pulled me back from the brink, who had given me the tools to fight my own demons. I wondered if he had known that my encounter with the Iara would ultimately change me for the better. I realized that he had been preparing me for this, that he had known that I was destined for something great. The old man was always full of secrets, and perhaps that was one of them. I decided to go to his village, a small settlement on the edge of the jungle, the place where he had grown up. It was a place that I had always avoided, a place that was filled with memories of my own past, of the boy that I used to be, full of naive arrogance and a thirst for adventure. It was a journey back to my roots, to the source of my connection to the river, and to the ancient ways of the Amazon. When I arrived at the village, I found it deserted. The huts were empty, the fires cold, the silence filled with an unsettling stillness. It was as if the village had been abandoned long ago, a place forgotten by time. I felt a strange sense of unease, a feeling that something terrible had happened there. The silence was heavy, pregnant with a foreboding presence. I started to explore, walking between the empty huts, calling out for Joan, but there was no answer. I could feel the eyes on me, the sense of something watching from the shadows. I felt a cold dread wash over me, a feeling that I was not alone, that I was being drawn into a new danger, something that was much more powerful than the Iara. The ground started to tremble, slowly at first, then more violently, the trees around me shaking with the force of an unseen power. And then I saw it. A creature emerged from the jungle, its form shifting between the familiar and the monstrous. It was like the Iara, but far more powerful, its eyes burning with an unnatural fire. It was the true heart of the river's darkness, the source of the pain and suffering that had corrupted the Iara. It was an ancient spirit, a force of nature, a being of pure chaos and destruction. And in that moment I realized I had been wrong about everything. The Iara had not been the true enemy at all. She was just a victim, just like me. And now it was time to face the true darkness. The creature that stood before me was unlike anything I had ever seen or imagined. It was an ancient entity, a being that seemed to be woven from the very fabric of the jungle, a manifestation of the river's deepest fears and darkest secrets. Its form shifted and writhed, a grotesque parody of the natural world, a twisted reflection of the beautiful Amazon I had sworn to protect. Its eyes burned with an infernal fire, a cold light that seemed to pierce the very depths of my soul, and its voice echoed through the clearing, not with the seductive melody of the Iara, but with a guttural roar that shook the very foundations of my being. It was the source, the heart of the darkness that had corrupted the Iara, the force that had preyed on her vulnerability and twisted her into the monster I had faced. It was the true enemy, the embodiment of chaos and destruction, a being that had fed on the pain and suffering of countless souls for centuries. I was not just facing a creature of legend, I was facing the core of something primeval, something ancient and powerful, and I knew that my journey was not over. It had barely just started. The Iara had been just a stepping stone, a glimpse into the true darkness that lay beneath the surface. It lunged at me, its claws like razors, its teeth like daggers. The ground shook with the force of its attack, the air crackling with energy. The fight was not a dance of songs or words, it was a brutal, visceral struggle for survival. I used all my strength, all the skills I had learned as a ranger, to evade its attacks, to find an opening, to exploit any weakness. But I soon realized that I could not fight it with brute force. It was more than just muscle and bone. It was a force of nature, an entity that was almost too powerful to comprehend. I remembered the old woman's words, the stories of the ancient shamans, the protectors of the river. They had not defeated the darkness through violence, but through understanding, through connection to the very essence of the Amazon. I closed my eyes, reaching deep within myself, connecting to the ancient rhythms of the river, to the powerful energy of the jungle, and it was then that I understood what I had to do. I had to become one with the river, to channel its power, to transform myself into a force that could stand against the true darkness. I focused all of my energy, my will, my purpose into the core of my being, and I opened myself to the river, to the spirit of the jungle, to the ancient wisdom that coursed through its very essence. And in that moment, something extraordinary happened. I felt myself transforming, my body merging with the water, the earth, the trees. I was no longer just Matias Silva. I was something else, something new. I felt the ancient power surge through, my veins, my arms transforming into the branches of the great trees, my feet becoming the roots that anchored them to the earth, my voice the roar of the river itself. The creature recoiled, its infernal light dimming as it recognized the change. That had occurred within me. It had met an equal, and it knew that its reign of terror was about to end. The fight became more intense, our power clashing in a ferocious battle of energies, an exchange of raw strength and purpose. The river churned and writhed around us. The very fabric of reality seemed to tear and distort, and the air vibrated with the force of the conflict. It was not just a physical battle, but a struggle for the very soul of the Amazon, a fight for the future of the river and the lives that depended on it. And then, in the midst of the chaos and the destruction, I saw it, a small, vulnerable seed of light at the core of the creature's darkness. It wasn't pure evil, it wasn't pure chaos, it was something else. I focused all my power, all my will, on that small point, channeling the light of the river, the strength of the jungle, into that vulnerable spot. It was the only way. It was the last chance. The creature writhed and screamed, its power fading as the light grew stronger. It was as if I was pulling out a thorn that had been there for centuries, a malignant entity that was causing so much damage. Its screams echoed throughout the forest. Then finally, it was no more. It was as if the river had breathed a sigh of relief. As the darkness retreated, the chaos subsiding, the world returning to a state of balance. And I felt, with absolute certainty, that it was finally over. I had faced the true darkness, and now I was ready for what came next. I looked towards the horizon. What I saw was not the end, but a beginning of something new. But that's another story, for another time. The aftermath of the battle was a profound silence, a stillness that settled over the river like a soft blanket. The jungle, once tense and foreboding, now felt at peace, as if the very trees and waters were finally free from the grip of darkness. I felt the transformations receding, my body returning to its human form, the ancient power receding into the depth of the earth and the water. The changes had faded, but their legacy remained within me. I was no longer just Mateus Matt Silva, the ranger, the skeptic, the victim. I was something else, something new, a protector, a guardian, a being connected to the very soul of the Wafa Amazon. I finally understood the true meaning of my journey. It wasn't about defeating monsters, but about confronting my own fears, my own insecurities, my own darkness. It was about finding the courage to embrace compassion and empathy, even in the face of the most terrifying evil. And it was about understanding the interconnectedness of all things, the balance between light and darkness, the eternal dance of life and death. I returned to the village, a new village now full of life and activity. It was filled with happy laughter, songs, and children playing between the huts. It was clear that everything was all right, that the darkness was finally gone and the people were free from the fear that had consumed them for so long. It was an astonishing sight, and a deeply emotional one for me. I continued my work as a ranger, but with a renewed sense of purpose, a deeper understanding of the mysteries of the Amazon. I was not just protecting the river, but all that existed within it, the creatures, the spirits, the souls, and the stories that connected them all. I became the keeper of those stories, the guardian of the old ways, the protector of the fragile balance that existed within the heart of the jungle. The scars remained, a testament to the battles I had fought, the demons I had faced, and the transformations I had endured. But they were not scars of fear or pain. They were marks of strength, symbols of resilience, of the profound journey I had undertaken. They were the proof that I had faced the darkness, that I had survived, and that I had emerged from the ordeal a changed man. I never forgot the Iara, the tormented soul that had been freed from her prison of pain. I knew that her legacy would live on, that the river would always whisper her song in the wind. But it was no longer a song of fear. It was a song of sorrow, of understanding, of the hope that existed even in the darkest of places. And I became the carrier of that new song, a guardian of the past and a beacon of hope for the future. Years have passed since that night, since the battle with the ancient entity. I still patrol the river, still listen to its whispers, still feel its ancient power surging through my veins. Sometimes, when the moon is full and the water is still, I can almost hear her song, a faint melody carried on the breeze, a gentle reminder of the journey I undertook. And I wonder sometimes if she's watching over me as well, if she finally found her peace. And then I realize that it is not just the song of the Iara that I hear. It is the song of the river and all of its mysteries. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it has given you pause, made you consider the powers that are always around us. The world is full of secrets, and sometimes those secrets can be terrifying. Have you ever felt that your world is more than it seems? Then share your thoughts in the comments section below. And now, if you're brave enough, please click here to see my next story. It's about an old lighthouse and the secrets it guards within its walls.